Hi there. Thanks for stopping by. My name is Cyberpunk, and welcome to the Matrix. Today, I wanted to explore the enigmatic concept of uncrossable barriers. Few things make me feel as existential as this one scene in The Truman Show, where he spontaneously decides to drive to a random vacation spot away from his hometown. Whenever Truman gets far enough away, barriers come out in front of him to stop his progress, at which point he's forced to turn back, or find a way around the obstacle, only to be interrupted by a new barrier over and over again. It's as if the world is consciously and purposefully going out of its way to stop Truman from ever leaving the confines of the life that's been designated just for him. The desire to be free is part of human nature and resides in all of us. Yet, just like in The Truman Show, the world seems to be full of boundaries, both visible and invisible, as if there's some intelligent, conscious force out there that doesn't want us to see what lies beyond. Let's explore these barriers and what might be waiting for us on the other side. In ancient Greece, a Spartan king was once asked how far Sparta's borders extend. In response, he pulled out a spear and said, "As far as this can reach." There's real truth to this, as a nation's influence has historically been determined by military power. For Alexander the Great, the only true barrier he would ever face when extending his empire was the willingness of his own army to continue marching. After his father, Philip II, united Greece under Macedonian rule with his powerful army, Alexander set out on campaign, marching east to conquer the formidable Persian Empire. He was successful. After 10 years on campaign, he'd defeat the Persian king Darius III and become king of Persia himself, never losing a single battle. The original goal being complete, Alexander continued marching east into India. It's not known exactly how far the Greek maps extended east, but at this point, Alexander was at just about the edge of the known world. Determined as ever, Alexander continued marching east until he fought to a bloody victory against King Porus of India at the Battle of Hydaspes. At this point, his army had finally had enough. After considering their losses and hearing word of a dangerous army just up ahead, they refused to march any further and just wanted to go back home. Alexander was initially disappointed, but was talked into turning back. Although I hardly think military conquest is a noble goal, I can't help but admire Alexander's ambition. He stood at the edge of the known world and wanted to keep going, to see what lied beyond his maps, with no guarantee of success or that the benefits would even be worth it. Ultimately, the Beas River marked the final barrier Alexander would never cross. His army constructed 12 altars to their gods, marking the final extent of his campaign. They would turn back and never return. Alexander would die of a mysterious illness on the way back home to Macedon. 300 years later, in neighboring Italy, Julius Caesar found himself at another barrier that would change the world forever. While Caesar was on military campaign in neighboring Gaul, there was political turmoil back in Rome. There was back and forth in the Senate about whether Caesar would be allowed to run for another term as consul, seeing as he wasn't willing to give up command of his army and return to Rome to campaign in person. It was ultimately decided that Caesar would have to give up command of his legions, a combined 30,000 men, and return to Rome as a private citizen. Faced with this situation, Caesar made the monumental choice to march his 13th Legion up to the Rubicon, a tiny river that marked the border between Gaul and Italy. It was absolutely forbidden for an acting general to enter Italy, so Caesar stopped right at the foot of the river with his army behind him. He stood there for a while, everyone understanding exactly the seriousness of the situation.
The die is cast.
When Caesar finally crossed over the Rubicon, he went from celebrated and victorious general to invader. There was no taking this back. Caesar's invasion sparked a series of civil wars that saw Caesar become Roman dictator for life, the end of the Roman Republic, and the rise of the Roman Empire. Caesar himself would ultimately be assassinated by the Roman Senate. The course of world history was forever changed, and it all started when Caesar made the decision to cross this small river. Talk to me after a couple of drinks, and I'll bring up the subject of black holes before too long. I think the reason black holes are so interesting to me is that they seem like they really shouldn't exist at all. We're talking about a single point of infinite density out in space that warps the fabric of space-time itself, and will absorb absolutely anything unfortunate enough to get close by. It's like physics has a glitch in its code, and black holes are the result of a programming bug. Yet, black holes definitely do exist. We've detected their mergers, and even have a picture of one. If you were to go out in space and visit a supermassive black hole, you could actually get pretty far in and still be able to escape safely, provided you had powerful enough rockets that could get you the hell out of there. Get close enough and you'd reach the event horizon, the invisible barrier that separates a black hole from the rest of the universe. Cross over the event horizon, and you'll find yourself being pulled towards the black hole's singularity, with absolutely no way to ever return back home. Physics just wouldn't allow it. And if that wasn't already enough to keep you up at night, there is one other barrier in space that's just as interesting: the edge of the known universe. According to general relativity, it's impossible to travel any faster than the speed of light. And even if humanity ever figured out how to reach this maximum speed limit and keep traveling forever, we'd still never reach the end of the universe. That's because the universe itself is expanding faster than the speed of light, as a result of the Big Bang. The universe that we do know of consists of everything we can detect, because the light from there has had enough time to reach us on Earth, hence the observable universe. Although there's definitely more universe past this limit, there's an effective barrier in between the observable and unobservable universe. There isn't any particular reason to think there's anything special about the barrier itself or the universe past it, but there's no way to really know. What else could be out there? Just empty space? Or more fantastical planets, nebula, and galaxies? What about intelligent alien civilizations, more advanced than our own? Hell, what about multiple universes altogether, with multiple different versions of us? Your guess is as good as anyone else's. If you like feeling existential all the time, like I do, play around with the scale of the universe simulation next time you've got some downtime. Take a moment to appreciate how big planet Earth is, then keep scrolling out. Take note of the relative size of the Earth compared to massive stars, nebula, galaxies, until the simulation stops at the edge of the observable universe. One estimate compares the size of the observable universe to a light bulb, and the size of the entire universe to the size of Pluto. Take a moment to appreciate all the amazing sights that could be out there, just waiting for us to discover them, if we can only someday cross this barrier. Death might just be the ultimate barrier. Benjamin Franklin counted death as one of the only two certainties in life, along with taxes. Most religions that have ever been give some kind of explanation for what happens after death, be that an afterlife, reincarnation, or something else. And for just as long, people have attempted to communicate with those that have passed on. The definitive origins of Halloween are lost to time, but one possible explanation has its roots in the Celtic celebration of Samhain, marking the beginning of winter. During this time, it was believed spirits would cross over from the afterlife into our world, including the souls of deceased family members that would return home for one night. Fortune-telling was commonplace, as it was seen as the best time to be able to make contact with the deceased. Spiritualism, as defined as a belief in spirits and the ability to communicate with them, saw mainstream popularity in the United States towards the end of the Civil War. All of a sudden, you had the better part of a generation of young men dead from the war, and many widows were desperate to make contact with their now deceased husbands and anyone else that had suddenly passed away. At this time, your options were to pay money for a psychic medium to help communicate with the dead, or try it yourself at home. One method was spirit rapping, calling out letters one at a time and waiting to hear a rap, basically a bump in the night, and spell out a message that way. I could see this process taking forever and being, frankly, really tedious for people desperate to communicate with a deceased loved one. Probably in response to this gap in the market, the Ouija board was invented in 1886 by a group of businessmen led by Charles Kennard from Baltimore, who started the Kennard Novelty Company. The boards were marketed as a quick, easy, and fun way to communicate with the dead, for only $1.50 at the time. It was actually a pretty good sales pitch for its time, believe it or not. If you were into spiritualism, buying a Ouija board was an easier option than going out of your way to hire a medium. And with inventions like the telephone making instant communication across long distances now possible, it didn't seem out of place to think there could also be a similar invention, but to communicate with the afterlife. Ouija board production then took off. They became extremely popular, and the businessmen all became rich. People at this time didn't see any contradictions with spiritualism and the Bible's teachings, so there wasn't any pushback from the Christian church that you're used to seeing now. Now, here's the million-dollar question. Did the Ouija board really allow people to communicate with the dead? The commonly accepted scientific explanation for the Ouija board's function is actually due to an interesting physical phenomena called the ideomotor response, which basically means small, unconscious movements in people cause the planchette on the Ouija board to seem to move on its own. Include multiple participants for a more pronounced effect. But what about psychic mediums that claim to be able to communicate with the dead directly? The best documented attempts of spirit communication I could find actually come from Harry Houdini, the famous magician. While he seemed open to the ideas of spiritualism at varying points, he spent the last years of his life debunking so-called mediums that he saw as abusing the tricks of his trade to con vulnerable people out of their money in an attempt to contact their deceased loved ones. Houdini might have been influenced by a seance held by a medium that claimed she would be able to communicate with his recently deceased mother. She wrote out 5 pages of writing, supposedly produced by his mother. Houdini decided her abilities were fake, considering the resulting words were written in English, and the pages had a cross drawn on the corner, neither of which his mother would have done. As part of his campaign, Houdini would offer prize money to any mediums that could demonstrate spirit communication under carefully controlled conditions. No one was ever able to collect. Houdini would make one final attempt at proving or disproving spirit communication, this time with himself as the spirit. Harry and his wife Bess developed a secret code and promised each other that whoever died first would make every attempt to communicate this code from the dead. After Harry died, Bess organized seances to see if they could make contact with Harry and receive the secret message. The seances happened every Halloween and went on for 10 years until Bess finally decided the experiment was over. The audio from the last seance was recorded and is available to listen to online. The disappointment in Bess's voice clearly comes through, and who could blame her? Although in that moment, she knew she'd never be able to talk to her husband again, I like to think that the final seance provided some closure as well. After all the trouble Harry went through to debunk spirit communication, they could finally put the issue to rest, along with Harry himself. Even with all of Houdini's talent, still unmatched to this day, death would be the one place he wouldn't be able to escape from.
Houdini did not come through. My last hope is gone. I do not believe that Houdini can come back to me or to anyone. After faithfully following through the 10-year Houdini compact, using every type medium and seance, it is now my personal and positive belief that spirit communication in any form is impossible. The Houdini shrine has burned for 10 years. I now reverently turn out the light. It is finished. Good night, Harry.
These barriers are all probably here for a reason, and they're just something that we have to live with as a part of life. Some we may find that we can cross someday, and some we might not. To end this on a positive note, while we may never be able to cross some barriers, there's no reason we have to put up uncrossable barriers unnecessarily around ourselves. I truly hope you're able to explore and see as much of the world as you wish to, while you're still able. And be sure to let the people around you know what they need to hear from you, while we're all still on this side of heaven. Thanks for watching until the end of the video. That's very cash money of you. If you'd like to help me make more videos like this one, leave a like and let me know what your thoughts are on Uncrossable Barriers. I look forward to reading them. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you later.